Jessica Martinez found the envelope at 5:47 on a Tuesday morning. White paper, no name, sealed with just enough pressure that her fingers slipped right under the flap. Inside were 24 $100 bills, $2,400 in cash. The exact amount she needed to stop the sheriff from evicting her family in 14 hours. She didn't know who left it. She never would. But for now, with her hands shaking and dawn breaking over the parking lot, all she could do was fall to her knees on the cold tile and say the same two words over and over until her 7-year-old daughter heard her from the bedroom. God answered. But we're getting ahead of the story. Rewind 3 months, back to when Jessica's life still made sense, before the world proved that the floor you're standing on can disappear without warning. She was 34 years old and had worked as a medical billing specialist at the community clinic for 6 years. Patient files went in, insurance claims came out, and Jessica made it happen with the kind of precision that made doctors assume she'd always be there. Her cubicle had photos of her 3 kids taped to the partition. Emma, 7 years old with her mother's dark eyes. Carlos, 5, gap-toothed and wild. Sophia, barely walking, 18 months of sticky hands and midnight crying. Jessica lived alone with them in a 2-bedroom apartment in a building that had seen better decades. The rent was $900 a month, which was manageable when paychecks arrived every 2 weeks like clockwork. Her mother had raised her to stand on her own 2 feet, work hard, pay your bills, never ask for help. For 6 years, that system worked. The clinic closed on a Tuesday in March. Federal investigators arrived at 8 in the morning with cardboard boxes and badges, talking about Medicare fraud that had nothing to do with Jessica's department. The doctors looked stunned, medical degrees suddenly useless. The office manager cried at her desk. By Friday, everyone had 2 weeks, severance and reference letters that meant nothing when there were no jobs to apply for. Jessica made it through the first month on savings that had taken her 2 years to build. She went to Mr. Kovacs, her landlord, a man in his 60s who still collected rent checks in person and knew all his tenants by name. She explained the situation. He nodded, shifted his coffee cup from one hand to the other, told her to pay when she could. The second month, she begged. He looked at the floor, mentioned his own mortgage, said he'd give her until the end of the week. The third month, he slid the orange eviction notice under her door. She'd applied for unemployment the day after the clinic closed. The automated system promised processing within 4 to 6 weeks. 9 weeks had passed. Every job interview ended the same way. She was overqualified, or they needed someone immediately, or they'd be in touch soon. Soon became a word that meant never. The notice taped to her refrigerator glowed under the kitchen light, like something radioactive. Bright orange paper with black text that said she had 72 hours to pay $2,400 in back rent or vacate the premises. The sheriff would enforce the order at 9 p.m. on Tuesday, November 19th. That was tomorrow. Jessica stood at her kitchen window now, on Monday night, watching the parking lot lights flicker in the darkness. Her car sat 3 spaces down with a dead battery and a broken alternator she couldn't afford to fix. $400 for a repair that might as well have been $4 million. Behind her, cardboard boxes lined the walls. She'd packed everything they owned in boxes scavenged from behind the grocery store and trash bags that smelled like industrial cleaner. The kids, clothes. The dishes her mother had given her. The photos of her mother holding Emma as a newborn, back when there was still someone to call when things went wrong. Her mother had died 2 years ago. Lung cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to funeral. She'd been Jessica's only family, the only person who watched the kids when Jessica worked late, the only one who knew how to make poverty feel like an adventure instead of a defeat. Now there was no one. Carlos coughed from the couch where he'd been sleeping for the past week. His bedroom was already packed, boxes stacked to the ceiling. He had strep throat. The antibiotics cost $63, charged to a credit card that was already maxed out. The pills sat on the counter next to the eviction notice, both of them reminders of problems multiplying faster than she could solve them. Sophia stirred in her crib. The baby was 18 months old, still in diapers, still waking twice a night for reasons Jessica couldn't always decode. She moved quietly through the apartment, stepping over boxes, past Emma's backpack by the door. The 7-year-old had packed it herself yesterday. Not with school supplies, but with clothes, because she'd asked where they were going after Friday, and Jessica had said they were moving. She didn't say they were moving to her car, or to the women's shelter with the 2-week waiting list, or to nowhere at all. Jessica pulled Sophia from the crib, felt the baby's warm weight settle against her chest. Through the wall came the sound of Mrs. Chen's television, early morning news in Cantonese. The elderly woman had lived next door for 20 years. She smiled at the children in the hallway, always knew when someone was sick or struggling, had probably seen the orange notice on Jessica's door. Jessica wondered if the whole building knew. She wondered if that mattered anymore. She sat on the couch in the gray pre-dawn light, nursing Sophia while Carlos wheezed in his sleep. The food pantry had kept them fed cheese sticks and bread and canned vegetables that Emma said tasted like metal. But the food pantry couldn't pay rent. She'd called every church in the phone book. They all said the same thing. We're praying for you. Our emergency fund is empty. Have you tried the county? She'd tried the county. The county had a 6-week waiting list. The clock read 2:17 a.m. Sophia fell back asleep. Jessica stood carefully, laid the baby back in the crib, and walked through the apartment to the bathroom. She closed the door, turned on the fan so the kids wouldn't hear, and sat on the floor with her back against the tub. The tile was cold through her jeans. There was a crack near the toilet she'd been meaning to fix for a year. She stared at that crack and started talking. I don't know what to pray anymore, she whispered to the wall. I don't have a backup plan. I don't have anyone to call. I need $2,400 by tomorrow night, and I have no idea where it's going to come from. Her throat felt tight. She pulled her knees to her chest. I've tried everything, she said. I've applied everywhere. I've called everyone. I've done everything right, and it's still not enough. My kids are going to watch me fail them, and I don't know how to stop it. She waited for something. A voice. A feeling. Some sign that someone was listening. But there was only the dripping faucet, and the fan rattling in the ceiling, and the sound of her own breathing in the small dark room. She pulled her mother's Bible from where she kept it on the bathroom shelf, behind the extra toilet paper where it wouldn't get wet. The cover was worn soft, the pages thin from years of reading. Her mother had underlined verses in blue ink, made notes in the margins in handwriting that was shaky toward the end. Jessica opened to Philippians, found the passage marked with 3 lines and a star. But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. She read it once, twice, 10 times, until the words blurred and her tears made dark spots on the paper that wouldn't dry. I'm at the end, she said to the empty bathroom. I don't know what comes next. But if you can hear me, we need help. We need it now. The silence pressed in. No peace came. No warmth filled the room. Just cold tile and fluorescent light and the kind of exhaustion that made her bones ache. She fell asleep there, curled on the bathroom floor with the Bible open on her lap, and woke 3 hours later to Sophia crying from the crib. The clock read 5:47 a.m., Tuesday morning, 14 hours until the sheriff arrived. Jessica stood, her back stiff from sleeping on tile. She splashed water on her face, looked at herself in the mirror. Dark circles, unwashed hair, the face of someone who'd run out of options 3 days ago. She opened the bathroom door, walked to the kitchen to start coffee even though she only had enough grounds for 1 more pot, pulled open the front door to take out the trash bag that had been sitting by the entrance since yesterday. The cold November air hit her face. That's when she saw it. A white envelope on the doormat. Plain. Letter-sized. Sealed. No writing on the outside. No return address. No name. Jessica bent down and picked up the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind banks used for important documents. She turned it over in her hands, searching for any marking, any clue about where it came from or who had left it. Nothing. Just smooth white paper sealed with a strip of glue that had barely dried. Her heart was beating faster. She didn't know why yet. She stepped back inside and closed the door quietly, checking the peephole first to see if anyone was standing in the hallway. Empty. Just the fluorescent lights humming and the stained carpet and the silence of a building still asleep. She turned the envelope over again, held it up to the light coming through the kitchen window. No watermark visible through the paper. No shadow of writing inside. The seal gave way easily when she slid her finger under the flap. Inside was something green. She pulled it out. Cash. $100 bills, stacked and folded once. Her hands started shaking before her brain caught up to what she was seeing. She unfolded the bills, and they scattered across the counter like leaves falling. She tried to count them, but her fingers wouldn't cooperate. 1, 2, 5, 10. She lost track. Started over. 24 bills. All hundreds. All real. She could feel the texture of the paper, see the security strip woven through, smell that specific scent of currency that had been in someone's wallet or bank envelope. $2,400. The exact amount. Not 2,000. Not 3,000. Exactly what she owed Mr. Kovacs, down to the dollar. 2 months, rent at $900 each, plus $600 in late fees. Jessica's knees went weak. She sank to the floor right there in the kitchen, the money falling around her like snow. Her chest felt tight. She couldn't get enough air. Sounds came out of her throat that weren't quite crying and weren't quite laughing. Something in between, something that came from a place deeper than words. She gathered the bills with trembling hands, smoothing them flat against the linoleum. Counted them again to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. 24. She held one up to the window light, looking for anything that would tell her this was fake, a joke, a mistake. The watermark showed Franklin's face. The security thread glowed under the morning sun. These were real bills, real money, left outside her door by someone who knew exactly what she needed and exactly when she needed it. She stayed on the floor. Time stretched and compressed in ways that didn't make sense. The clock might have said 5 minutes or 20. Sophia was still asleep. Carlos was still wheezing on the couch. The world was still turning while she sat surrounded by more money than she'd seen in months, left by someone who didn't want her to know their name. Her hands were still shaking when she stood up. She walked to the kids' bedroom on legs that felt like they might give out. Emma was awake, staring at the ceiling, her eyes red like she'd been crying. The girl looked at her mother and opened her mouth to ask something, but Jessica was already talking. "God answered," she whispered. Her voice cracked halfway through. "God answered, God answered, God answered." She woke Carlos gently, careful not to jar his sore throat. She picked up Sophia even though the baby had just fallen back asleep, holding her close enough to feel the heartbeat against her chest. She gathered all 3 children on the couch and spread the money on the coffee table in front of them, like proof that miracles still happened. "We're not moving," she said. "We can stay. God provided." Emma started crying. Carlos asked if they could have McDonald's for breakfast. Sophia reached for the bills with her fat baby hands, and Jessica laughed and cried at the same time, holding all 3 of them in a tangle of arms and tears and relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning in reverse. At 8 a.m., when Mr. Kovacs opened his office on the first floor, Jessica was already waiting outside his door. She'd put the money back in the white envelope, counted it 3 more times, smoothed it flat, counted it again. The landlord arrived carrying coffee in a paper cup and keys jangling on a ring. He stopped when he saw her standing in the hallway. "Jessica," he said. He looked tired. Sad, almost. "I'm sorry about tonight. I really am. But I have to." "I have your rent," she interrupted. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "All of it." He blinked. "What?" "All of it. $2,400. Rent and late fees. Everything you're owed." Mr. Kovacs fumbled with his keys, dropping them once before getting the office door open. He set his coffee down on the desk, sloshing it slightly. Gestured for her to sit. She stayed standing. "Where did you?" he started, then stopped. Sat down heavily in his chair. Jessica handed him the envelope. He pulled out the bills and counted them slowly, licking his thumb between each one the way old people did. His adding machine sat on the corner of the desk, buttons worn smooth from decades of use. He didn't use it. Just counted by hand, moving his lips slightly, making small piles of 500 each. The morning sun came through dusty blinds and made stripes across the paperwork on his desk. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. A dog barked. Normal sounds of a normal morning, while Jessica's whole world pivoted on whether he'd accept what she was giving him. $2,400, Mr. Kovacs said finally. He looked up at her. "Where did this come from?" "I don't know," she said. "Someone left it outside my door this morning. In an envelope just like that one. No name, no note. Just the money." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was trying to decide if she was lying. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a file folder. Her file. She could see the eviction notice on top, her name typed in those impersonal block letters. He tore it in half. The sound of paper ripping made something in Jessica's chest release. Her shoulders dropped 2 inches, like she'd been holding up the ceiling and someone had finally told her she could put it down. "I was going to give you 1 more week," Mr. Kovacs said quietly. "I couldn't sleep last night thinking about those kids. I was going to call the sheriff this morning and tell him there was a mistake, buy you a few more days." Jessica's eyes burned. She didn't trust herself to speak. "But this is better," he continued. He fed the torn eviction notice into the paper shredder under his desk. The machine whined and chewed it into strips. "Someone out there looking out for you." "That's real good." He wrote her a receipt by hand on a carbon copy form that looked like it was from 1985. His handwriting was shaky but careful. "Paid in full," he wrote at the bottom, and pressed the stamp so hard the ink bled slightly into the paper. They shook hands. His grip was apologetic, relieved. Jessica folded the receipt twice and put it in her pocket next to the white envelope she'd kept. Outside in the parking lot, her kids were waiting in the car with the windows down, even though it was cold. Emma had her face pressed against the glass. Carlos was singing something off-key. Sophia was trying to eat the seatbelt. Jessica got in the driver's car and just sat there for a minute, her hands on the steering wheel, her eyes closed. Then she started the engine. It turned over on the first try, which felt like a small bonus miracle, and drove to McDonald's. The restaurant smelled like coffee and grease and hash browns. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The floors were sticky. It was the most beautiful place Jessica had seen in months. "Order anything you want," she told the kids. Emma pressed her face against the menu board, reading every item twice. Carlos bounced on his toes despite his sore throat. Sophia banged her hands on the counter and babbled at the teenager taking their order. "Can I get a Happy Meal?" Emma asked. Her voice was small, cautious, like she was afraid to hope. "With the toy?" "Yes," Jessica said. "Absolutely yes." "Can I get pancakes?" Carlos asked. "And orange juice?" "Yes." "Can I get hash browns too?" "Yes, whatever you want." The teenager rang it up without looking at them. $18.47. Jessica pulled a $100 bill from her pocket, one she'd kept separate from the rent money, and handed it over. The cashier held it up to the light, checking the watermark, then made change. Jessica put the bills in her wallet and didn't think about what they'd been for yesterday. They sat in a booth by the window. Emma ate her pancakes slowly, savoring each bite. Carlos dipped his hash browns in ketchup until they were more red than potato. Sophia threw most of her food on the floor, but seemed happy doing it. Jessica ordered herself an Egg McMuffin and coffee, the first restaurant food she'd eaten in 3 months. "Mom," Emma said, her mouth still half full. "Does this mean we can do birthdays again?" Jessica felt her throat tighten. "Yes, sweetie. We can do birthdays again." "And Christmas?" "Yes." "Can we get a tree?" "We can get a tree." Emma smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. Ketchup was smeared on Carlos's chin. Sophia was singing some baby song that was just vowel sounds strung together. Jessica looked at her children eating McDonald's breakfast like it was a feast and felt something break open in her chest. Not breaking apart, but breaking open. Making room for something she'd been too scared to feel. That afternoon, while Sophia napped and the older kids watched cartoons, Jessica's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Is this Jessica Martinez?" A woman's voice, professional, slightly rushed. "Yes?" "This is Linda from the unemployment office. I'm calling about your claim." Jessica's stomach dropped. Here it was. Some mistake. Some form she'd filled out wrong. Some reason they were denying her after all. "Your benefits have been approved," Linda said. "Back pay will be deposited within 10 to 14 business days. Your weekly benefits start next week. Did you receive the letter we sent?" Jessica sat down on the couch. She started. "Could you say that again?" "Your claim is approved. You'll receive 9 weeks of back pay plus ongoing weekly benefits. The amount is $385 per week." Jessica wrote it down on the back of an old envelope. Not the white one, a different one, a bill she hadn't been able to pay. She made Linda repeat it twice just to be sure she'd heard right. "Thank you," she said when they hung up. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." She stood in her apartment looking at the boxes still stacked against the walls. They'd need to unpack everything. Put it all back. Make this place home again. But right now she just stood there, phone in her hand, feeling like the floor had solidified under her feet after months of standing on ice. 2 days later, another call. Different woman, different office. "Ms. Martinez?" "This is Sharon from Valley Medical Associates. We received your resume several weeks ago, and we've just completed our hiring process. We'd like to offer you the medical billing specialist position if you're still available." Jessica gripped the phone tighter. "I'm available. The salary is $42,000 annually, which is about 15% more than the market rate for this position, but we really value experience. We also offer health insurance, dental, and child care assistance, up to $300 per month. Could you start Monday?" "Yes," Jessica said before Sharon finished the sentence. "Yes, I can start Monday." They went through the details, schedule, benefits, parking, dress code, and Jessica wrote it all down in handwriting that got shakier as the call went on. When she hung up, she sat on the couch for a long time, staring at the wall, wondering how many things God had arranged that she still couldn't see. That weekend, she tried to find out who had left the money. She knocked on every door in the building. Mrs. Chen smiled wide and said how wonderful, what a blessing, but claimed she didn't know anything. The young couple downstairs said they'd heard about the eviction but hadn't left any money. The college students on the 3rd floor barely looked up from their phones. She asked at church on Sunday, pulled aside the pastor after service. No one admitted anything. Everyone seemed genuinely happy for her, genuinely surprised, genuinely clueless about where $2,400 had come from. No one knew. Or if they knew, they weren't telling. By Monday, Jessica stopped asking. Maybe it didn't matter who had done it. Maybe what mattered was that someone had heard her prayers when she thought she was alone in a dark bathroom at 2 a.m, talking to a cracked tile and hoping someone was listening. Maybe what mattered was knowing that when she'd run out of options and reached the end of herself, that's when she discovered she wasn't alone after all. 2 years passed like water, finding its level after a flood. Jessica managed billing for 3 medical offices now, her own small department with 2 assistants who called her boss and meant it. She'd rebuilt her savings 1 paycheck at a time, first 1 month's rent, then 2, then 3. Her car had a new alternator and current registration. The kids were thriving. Emma was 9 now and got straight A's. Carlos was 7 and played soccer every Saturday. Sophia was 3 and could name every color in the crayon box. They still lived in the same apartment, though Jessica could afford better. She'd looked at nicer places, new construction with granite countertops and in-unit washers. But something stopped her every time. These walls held the memory of where she'd been, what God had done when she had nothing left. The kitchen floor where she'd fallen to her knees. The window where she'd counted hours until eviction. The doormat where Grace had arrived in a white envelope. Leaving would feel like forgetting. She kept that original envelope tucked inside her mother's Bible at Philippians chapter 4, verse 19. The paper had gone soft from handling, creased from being folded and unfolded hundreds of times. Sometimes she took it out just to hold it, feeling the texture, remembering the November morning when everything changed. 6 months after that morning, Jessica started something new at her church. She called it the Envelope Ministry. The concept was simple. When someone in the congregation faced financial crisis, a small group would collect cash donations. Then someone would deliver it anonymously. No names. No recognition. Just help arriving exactly when needed. The pastor was skeptical when she first proposed it. "We have a benevolence fund already," he said. "People can apply for assistance." "But they don't," Jessica replied. "They're too ashamed, too proud. They wait until it's too late. This is different. This is someone showing up before they have to ask. What prevents people from lying? Taking advantage? Faith prevents it," she said. And the fact that people who've really been desperate know the difference between need and want. The first envelope went to a single father whose hours had been cut. The second to a couple drowning in NICU bills. The third to a widow who'd fallen behind on rent after her husband died. That third delivery was the one that changed everything for Jessica. She drove to the address on a Thursday evening in September, 8 months after finding her own envelope. The widow's name was Margaret Chen, no relation to her neighbor Mrs. Chen, though the coincidence felt significant. Margaret lived in a ground-floor apartment in a complex across town, the kind of building where the parking lot lights were always broken and nobody made eye contact in the hallways. Jessica had $700 in a white envelope on the passenger seat. The church had collected it in 3 days. Some people gave $20. Some gave $50. One couple gave $200 with a note that said, "We remember what it's like." She parked and sat in her car for a moment, engine idling, hands sweating on the steering wheel. This was her first time delivering. The pastor had offered to do it, but Jessica said no. She needed to be the one, needed to understand what it felt like on the other side. She walked to Margaret's door, her footsteps echoing in the concrete breezeway. Inside, she could hear a television, voices from a game show, the clatter of dishes in a sink. She bent down quickly, slid the envelope under the door. The paper made a soft whisper against the threshold, and then turned and walked fast back to her car. Her heart was pounding like she'd done something illegal. She got in the driver's seat and ducked down slightly, watching through the windshield. After a moment that felt like an hour, the door opened. Margaret stepped out in slippers and a faded bathrobe, looking down at the white rectangle on her doormat. She picked it up slowly, arthritis making her movements careful. Turned it over. Opened it. Jessica watched her pull out the cash. Watched her count it with shaking hands. Watched her sink down onto the doorstep like her knees had given out, the money clutched to her chest, her whole body curling forward. Then Margaret did something Jessica wasn't expecting. She looked up. Not at any particular person or car, just up at the sky, her mouth moving in words Jessica couldn't hear. But she knew what the woman was saying. She knew because she'd said the same words 2 years ago on a kitchen floor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Jessica drove home crying so hard she had to pull over twice. She sat in a grocery store parking lot with her hands on the wheel, tasting salt, feeling something shift inside her that had nothing to do with giving money and everything to do with finally understanding what it meant to be part of someone else's miracle. That's when the envelope ministry stopped being a program and became something closer to a calling. In 2 years, they gave away over $15,000. Jessica kept careful records, not of who received the money, but of the amounts. 23 envelopes delivered. 23 families reached before they fell completely through the cracks. She never told people it was her idea. Let the church think it was a group decision. Better that way. On a Thursday evening in November, 2 years and 8 months after her own envelope, Jessica drove through her neighborhood with another delivery on the passenger seat. $1,200 this time, collected for a single mother named Aisha, who just lost her job at the grocery store. Mrs. Chen had mentioned it in passing, the way she mentioned everything. That young woman on the 3rd floor, she'd said. 2 little ones. Just got her hours cut to nothing. Jessica knew what that meant. Knew the timeline. First the hours get cut, then they stop calling you for shifts. Then you stop showing up because there's no point. Then the bills pile up. Then the notices come. Then you're sitting on a bathroom floor at 2 a.m. wondering how everything fell apart so fast. Aisha lived on the 3rd floor of Jessica's building. They'd passed each other in the hallway maybe 3 times, never more than a polite nod. Jessica knew she had 2 kids, a boy around Carlos's age and a younger girl. Knew her car barely ran. Knew she worked nights, or used to. Knew everything she needed to know about what the woman was facing. The fear that tasted like metal. The shame that made you avoid neighbors. The calculations at 3 a.m. about which bill to skip and whether sleeping in your car with kids was safer than a shelter with a waiting list. Jessica parked and walked to the building's entrance, the envelope in her jacket pocket. Her own hands were sweating now, her heart beating fast like the first time. It never got easier. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, hearing televisions and arguments and normal Thursday evening sounds behind closed doors. Aisha's door was at the end of the hall. Jessica could hear children inside, young voices arguing about something, a mother's tired voice telling them to stop. The television was on, some cartoon with loud music. The smell of cooking rice drifted through the gap under the door. Jessica bent down and slid the envelope across the threshold, heard it whisper against the floor on the other side. Then she stood and walked quickly back down the hall, her footsteps too loud, her breath too fast. She made it to the stairwell before she heard the door open. Couldn't help it. She stopped and looked back through the small window in the stairwell door. Aisha stood in her doorway in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, looking down at the white envelope like it might disappear if she blinked. She picked it up slowly, turned it over, opened it. Jessica watched her pull out the money. $1,200 bills. Watched her hand go to her mouth. Watched her look up and down the empty hallway, searching for who'd left it. Then Aisha pressed the money to her chest, and her knees buckled. She caught herself on the doorframe, sliding down until she was sitting on the threshold, and the sounds that came out of her were the ones Jessica remembered, that space between crying and laughing where words don't exist. Jessica turned away and walked down the stairs before the woman could see her. Got in her car with tears on her own face, tasting salt, feeling like she'd just closed a circle that started 2 years ago on a cold November morning. At home, Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, her pencil scratching across long division problems. Carlos was building something elaborate with blocks, the plastic pieces clicking together. Sophia was coloring a rainbow, using every crayon and several that didn't belong in a rainbow at all. Jessica stood in the doorway watching them. Emma looked up from her math. "Mom," she said, "when I grow up, I want to be an envelope angel." Jessica laughed and pulled her daughter close, smelling strawberry shampoo. "Maybe you already are," she whispered. That night, after the kids were asleep, Jessica sat on the couch with her mother's Bible in her lap. She opened it to Philippians and pulled out the original white envelope. Held it up to the lamplight. The paper was soft now, almost fragile, but she could still remember every detail of the morning she found it. The cold doormat, her shaking hands, the impossible appearance of exactly what she needed. She still didn't know who'd left it. Probably never would. But she'd learned something more important than a name. Sometimes God's provision arrives wrapped in mystery, in ways that don't require understanding. Just gratitude. Just the willingness to receive grace when you've run out of every other option. And then, this was the part that surprised her, the willingness to become that same mysterious grace for someone else. The money had saved her family. But what came after had changed her completely. Because when you receive help in your darkest hour, you spend the rest of your life looking for chances to pass it on. You become the answer to prayers you'll never hear. You slip an envelope under a door and drive away before anyone can thank you. You learn that sometimes the greatest gift isn't knowing who saved you. It's becoming the kind of person who saves someone else.